Sup gang, Sheets here with an Enhancement Shaman pre-dungeon Tempest stacking guide. The goal here is to have 2 Tempests ready for the first pull of most dungeons. Now this is a slight augment to my full enhanced guide I posted a few weeks ago. Thanks to this comment here I realized there's a better way to handle this. To pull it off, you need to start by spending enough Maelstrom towards your next Tempest so you have 10 or less remaining to spend before it procs. A weak aura like the one I use here is required, otherwise you won't know where your spending is at. I use the Training Dummies and Dornagal to do this first part. The second part is to queue up your Awakening Storms to 2 stacks. It's important to keep it at 2 and not go to 3, as the third will proc the Tempest, and we want to wait until we're in the dungeon to do that. So here's an example of how I do this at the Dummies. Now I just happened to get lucky here and got my Awakening Storm stacks to 2 while getting my Maelstrom spending to the right spot. This doesn't always happen though, and honestly rarely does. So when you aren't this lucky, here's what you do. First, remove any existing Maelstrom you have by right-clicking the buff. Also be sure to wait until any summoned wolves have despawned, as they'll keep generating Maelstrom. Once you have no wolves and no Maelstrom, start casting Chain Lightning on the Dummies until your Awakening Storms gets to 2 stacks. If you're running Flowing Spirits, you'll need to be cognizant of any wolves that have spawned while this is happening. If one spawns, you'll need to wait for it to despawn before continuing. So now we've got our Maelstrom spending in the right spot and our Awakening Storm stacks at 2. Now we can head to the dungeon. An important note, the Tempest buff itself and Maelstrom generators like Ascendance and Feral Spirit will persist through the key starting, however Awakening Storm stacks will not. So what you need to do is just before the key holder starts the key, drop a Training Dummy and cast Chain Lightnings until the third Awakening Storm procs, which in turn procs a Tempest. Then pop Ascendance just before the countdown gets to 0, so when you're in the next countdown behind the shimmering wall, you'll have Maelstrom generating. Spend it as soon as you hit 10 stacks by using a Healing Surge on yourself. This will proc your second Tempest. Then you can spend another 10 to 20 Maelstrom on yourself to help get the next Tempest proc on its way. We'll look at an example next, but before that, let's talk about which dungeons you can and should use this for. Kara, don't do this. The first pull is so far away you'll likely lose the procs. Maybe if the tank is only going to the bottom of the stairs and not to the mini-boss, but even then it can be tight. Better off just keeping the Maelstrom stacks where they're at to proc a Tempest after your first Chain Lightning. Siege of Borealis, do this. Dawnbreaker, do this. City of Threads, do this with caution. If you're getting the Queen buff, that will cut into some of your time. Tempest procs are good for 30 seconds, so 10 of those will be used waiting on the dungeon timer, then another 10 to 12 walking and getting the buff. This forces you to send your Tempest pretty quick, and since the tank usually pulls the first 2 packs together, you may end up taking aggro. It's doable, just be cautious. Mists, do this. Necrotic Wake, do this. Stone Vault and Grimbatol, you can't place a Training Dummy inside either of those, so you're forced to do the one Tempest proc. Final thing, kind of a pro tip, make sure you drop your Training Dummy a good ways away from the group. A lot of pre-key cooldowns will accidentally hit the dummy, causing the player to go into combat, which prevents the key from actually starting. Ascendance is the prime culprit for this, so just keep the dummy a ways away. Okay, so example time, this is a 13 Dawnbreaker I ran. I'll pause the screen at the beginning so you can see my setup. My Awakening Storms is at 2 stacks, and my Maelstrom spending, this counter is actually a little buggy sometimes, but I knew that I only needed 10 more to proc my next Tempest. So ignore the number here, and you can see once we start the key and we're in the shimmering wait area, I send 10 using a Healing Surge, and then it immediately gives me my second Tempest. Now going into the pull, I can just do my normal routine, except I don't need to send Chain Lightning to proc my next Tempest. I already have it ready. And then I have another one ready for when I'm in my Ascendance window immediately. And then because my Maelstrom spending was already just at 20, my third Tempest is ready to go very shortly after. So I send 3 Tempests really quickly at the beginning of this pack, and I'm able to do a lot of damage. The Mage also lusted here for some reason. He apologized for it on the way to the next pack, but this is not normally where you send Lust, so that was a little confusing. But that's definitely contributing to me exceeding 10 mil without Nog. I also forgot to send my Crash Lighting, so I didn't have that buff for the beginning. Rookie mistake. So there you have it. Go impress your friends now by doing a crap load of damage at the beginning of a dungeon, and be sure to check out my full enhanced guide over here. Catch you in the next video.